Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mer Herosner Podcast Season 4, Episode 3. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and X. It's Thursday, October 26, 2023. I'm your host, Vic Aslanian, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Mr. Mike Balyan, where we discuss our great Armenian history, covering different eras, topics, and people. Please hit that like button, share, make sure you're subscribed, and if you're on Facebook, share with friends and family. We are back with our regular scheduled programming. There is a lot happening in the world today, and we'll continue to tell our stories to the world to make sure that the issue of the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh and the occupation of Armenian territories are not overshadowed by other conflicts. That's very important. We also want to thank everyone who has been donating to the Hike to Our Heroes fundraiser. Tavit and his team have been doing God's work on the ground in Armenia by helping displaced families from Artsakh. So please continue supporting this great organization. We had the hike with them a couple of weeks ago. That was really fun. We posted videos. We also had the raffle drawing, and the winner, I forget his name. I apologize. Patrick. There you go. Patrick was the winner.
I forgot his last name, but
he got his sculpture, Nuzde sculpture. And if you guys are interested in sculptures, as you know, you can always go to merherosner.com and place your order. And like I said, we are donating proceeds from those sculptures to these great organizations. Now, today, it is our distinct pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest, Katia Karageuzian, a brilliant author whose work has touched the hearts and minds of many. Katya is a gifted storyteller behind the captivating book Forbidden Homeland, Story of a Diasporan. You can see it right there on the screen.
The little thing was blocking it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There you go.
Wait, I gotta go this way. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So her insights into the intricate narratives of diaspora and the quest for identity resonates deeply with those who have had to navigate the complex tapestry of homeland and heritage. Today, we will discuss Katya's fascinating journey and the profound themes exploring her compelling literary work. Welcome, Katya.
Well,
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor being here.
How are you
Thank
tonight?
you for all the work
Thank
that
you
you're
for coming.
doing to raise awareness about the Artsakh ethnic cleansing and the fundraising that's still being
Yeah, it's very
We're
important.
trying to do our part.
it's still
Yeah.
enforced.
Everybody, we keep talking about unity. This is what it's about. We have to come together and help, the displaced families. They're everybody. If you're an Armenian, those are our brothers and sisters, and we need to help them right now. And until we go on to the next stage, which is figure out how to get our lands back. But that's a different topic. We were introduced to through a good friend, RP Grigorian, who she is an amazing artist herself. RP Publishing as well. They publish Western Armenian books. I know she's working on those. So, we actually were introduced, and when you had the book release in Barnes and Nobles, we were promoting it as well. But we wanted to kind of, first of all, how did that go, the Barnes and Noble experience?
Oh, it was very well. It went very well. We had a good turnout. A lot of Americans walked up and sat down and wanted to listen. It was wonderful because that's where we want to take the book. We want to take it to mainstream America. I always describe it as an Armenian-American story because my journey started here, took place here. And the book goes into a lot of background history and American involvement in Armenian history. A lot of things that, unfortunately, American history books do not cover. Things, different policies and issues from World War One until today.
Yeah.
obviously I wrote it to raise awareness, and I want the Americans to know where their money goes, what policies are enforced in their names. So the book does all that. As I said, it's an Armenian-American journey.
But before we get into the book, can you for our audience to know who Katya is, can you talk a little bit about your background as an author and your professional life?
Well, I was born in Beirut. Lebanon holds a special place in my heart, even though most of my life there, I lived it through the Lebanese Civil War. I've always been fascinated by history and politics. I have no idea why, since childhood. I also loved writing. So when I was young, I used to write poetry. My essays would win awards. So both passions come together in this book, history and writing. So we immigrated from Lebanon to California in 1984. I majored in biology for my undergrad, and then I went to receive my doctorate in pharmacy from the University of Southern California. I worked for many years for drug chain drugstores as a pharmacist. I managed a couple of Save on Drugs and CVS locations. And then I made the transition to hospital pharmacy. I currently work as a hospital pediatric pharmacist. I also love giving back to our community. I'm involved in many different organizations. And that's it. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and now I'm an author.
How did you become an author? What made you to write? To take your life experience, and what was the spark to go, I got to tell my story to people?
Actually, I never intended to publish this. This was a personal journal, but the way it evolved and the journey that the story took me to, and I'll explain later how it happened. Basically, it turned into a self-discovery and the discovery of our cause.
Yeah.
Because I realized that even though I had gone to Armenian schools, I didn't really have a good grasp of what had happened to us. So after an amazing event that basically is the catalyst of all this, the main journey was finding out who I was, why I was born in Lebanon, and what had happened to us. And so that took off, and the more I read a lot. I mean, every single book that came out on the genocide, I would buy in the 80s, late 80s and 90s. So as the story came together, I ran into a whole plethora of facts that were covered up geopolitically. So I realized that the Armenian genocide was not only covered up by Turkey, it was covered up by the entire world, especially the Western nations, because they had decided to have Turkey as their NATO ally and they didn't want to rock the boat. So the more I discovered, the more frustrated I became by not only my lack of knowledge, our lack of knowledge, or cumulative lack of knowledge, which is very detrimental. So when I was done with the project, which was basically something that I was doing for myself, I wanted to educate myself. I decided that there's value in publishing this, and first I started writing it for my family. But at the end, I was like, I can't hang on to this. This doesn't belong just to me alone. It belongs to humanity.
If you don't mind me asking, how long did you kind of accumulate all of these writings before it started to dawn on you that I might need to put this out?
Well, let me tell you about how this started.
Okay.
So, 1984, we came from California. And about 4 years later, I was going to CSUN, doing my undergrad, as I said. And for some odd reason, I gravitated towards two Bolsa High students. I don't know why, but retrospectively, I think it was meant to be.
Sure.
So one day, we're talking, and I don't know from where this comment came up. They were talking, and I guess I wanted to interrupt them. So I said, I'm from there too. Essentially, I'm also from Turkey, and my dad's side is from Malatya. So I could have mentioned my mom's side, which is they're from Adana. But for some reason, I mentioned Malatya. So lo and behold, one of the girls, one of the students, turns to me and she says, "Wait a minute, I'm born in Malatya." So I was like, "Whoa." Anyhow, so she tells her parents, and apparently after the genocide, only 5 families had survived in Malatya. So the parents kind of got
5?
only 5
Wow.
families had survived. So her parents kind of got interested, and they inquired if my dad knew any of the names of the relatives, of his relatives. So, long story short, through this new friend of mine, we found descendants of my paternal grandmother's siblings here in California. So I knew nothing about these relatives. They had lost contact since the genocide.
Yeah.
And it was for the first time. For the first time, I found out that my grandmother was the only one in her family who had escaped to Lebanon with my grandpa during the genocide. The rest of her family had stayed behind in Turkey. So my dad remembered their names because when he was 11, his mom took him to Malatya once, and that was it. So they set up a meeting. So we came to meet our newfound relatives, and it was a life-changing experience for me. So that's from where my interest in the genocide came, because not only we had strangers completing each other's story, my dad's story, their story matched, but they added to it because now we found out what happened to the Armenians who stayed behind in Turkey. A lot of things that I wasn't aware of. Which basically made me see how disconnected our communities were from one another. Okay, the ones in Lebanon didn't know what happened to the ones who stayed beyond in Turkey, or what was happening to the Armenians in Soviet Armenia. Nobody knew from each other, but I learned so much from them. Okay, first of all, their Armenian name, they were forced to change it in 1934 because of the surname law. So basically, long story short, I found out from them that the Armenian genocide had never stopped, that it was a ruse that it had stopped. It had never stopped. It had just changed ways, mostly non-violent ways of ethnic cleansing. There was always ways to push the remaining Armenians out of the country, all sorts of oppressions. So it had never stopped. So this was happening in 1988. So in the backdrop, we were having the Sumgait pogroms happen. And for the first time in my life, I heard about Nagorno-Karabakh. I hadn't heard about Nagorno-Karabakh in Lebanon either. So basically, I realized that I didn't know much, period. So, and that's where the journey started. I found more relatives. I put the story together. The story became so detailed, and that I wanted to start writing about it before I forgot. But then, because of my love of history and politics, I wanted to put some of the events in my family's story into historical perspective. So I would they said during that time this happened. Let me see what was happening around that time. So one thing led to another. And as I said, a whole Pandora's box opened in front of me, all sorts of information that I wasn't aware of.
I can imagine.
And all sorts of facts that were literally being covered up by the entire world. So, so basically, during that time, obviously, Turkey was, the genocide was in its last phase, the phase of denial, which is an active phase of genocide. The world was participating. They were enabling them. If you remember, I don't know if you've heard a bit about it, but there was a lot of lobbying against every single Armenian genocide recognition resolution that was going to come out in U.S. Congress. Movies that were gonna be produced.
Yeah,
The productions.
what was it? The Musa.
40 Days of
Musa.
Musa.
Yeah, Musa.
Yeah.
They
So I
had
realized
major
that,
actors who were going to
yes. So I realized that, wait a minute, this is not just Turkey. Okay, there's the whole world is covering this up. So that's where the journey started. But then I uncovered so much more.
be.
And that's the journey of Forbidden Homeland. It covers all the way to the 44-day 2020 war.
I have the book, the QR code right there on the screen, guys. Please go ahead and scan it and purchase the book through Amazon. It's a fascinating book, and it's written. It's great storytelling. So there's a reason we wanted Katya to be on the show, because of the fact that the way she tells the story, as she mentioned, it goes back from when the genocide began and leads up to what's happening
Very
today.
recently.
And it will clearly show you how, like you said, the genocide never ended. It has been happening for over 100 years.
Well, what I discovered, and as I said, I read a lot of books. To be honest, the books that revealed the most to me, besides the Richard Hovhannisyan books and so on, were the books written by Taner Akçam, the Turkish historian who was exiled from Turkey because he recognizes the Armenian genocide, and he writes about it. So his books were very revealing because they showed me the Turkish perspective.
Another side of it.
Because as far as I'm concerned, my approach was kind of scientific because that's my background. I wanted to discover the root cause of this, because nothing no world event happens in the vacuum. There's always an economic or political reason behind it. So I wanted to find out why this policy was instigated against us. So his books were very revealing. Through all my readings, though, something fascinating happened. There was a clear connection between the genocide and the Artsakh conflict. Clear as, black ink on white. Because during the same time frame as where the genocide was happening, during the same time, the same actors were orchestrating massacres in what we now know as Azerbaijan. So basically, and we'll go into this further, we delegated or deferred the definition of what had happened to us to the world. And what is the world going to do? They're going to explain it the way it suits them.
Of course.
Yeah.
Even the years 1915 to 1923 are not accurate, because the policy of ethnic cleansing of the Armenians in particular started in 1894 when the Armenian question came up.
Yeah.
What they referred by Armenian question was the question of Armenian independence, as the territories of the Ottoman Empire
we did a
were
whole episode
breaking.
on this.
So the accurate date of the start date would be 1894. And that's the other thing. We lost 300,000 Armenians were put to the sword during the Hamidian massacres. Okay, that was a genocide. They were killed because of
In and of itself.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we'll touch upon that later when you ask me question number 7.
Okay.
But so it was not explained correctly because, as I said, we deferred the explanation to others. And strange thing about us Armenians, I guess we're so proud. We don't want to admit how many times we got massacred. So we downplayed the whole thing. So it started in 1894. And then in 1909, we had the Adana massacres. Before that, in 1905, we got massacred in the country of Azerbaijan, because Russia was going through some,
As always.
As always. So, and then in 1919, again, within that classic time frame between 1915 to 1923, you had Enver Pasha go all the way to Baku and massacred 30,000 Armenians because they wanted to build a new Turkic nation out of that area. And then in 1920, again, that falls again within that time frame. We had the entire Armenian population of Shushi, 20,000 Armenians be massacred. So there was I'm reading. I'm like, wait a minute. The Armenian genocide happened on two fronts, not just Turkey. So why didn't we explain it this way? Because literally the same actors were doing this. So there's a very, total connection between the Artsakh conflict,
which goes back to since the early 1900s.
I found. By the way, all of this is available.
Yeah, of course,
it's been promoted aggressively
because nobody takes the time to their research to learn about it. Like, listen, you talked about how in Lebanon you didn't know anything about Nagorno-Karabakh, right? And that's not your fault because people didn't talk about it. People didn't know about it. It was brushed under the rug during the Soviet era. People in Armenia didn't even know what the Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh was. So it was by design.
Totally by design. And the other thing, so I was going to mention that I ran into a quote by the Speaker of the Parliament in Turkey in 1946, where he's saying, literally, he's telling his Azeri brothers to keep the Karabakh conflict going because it is their last chance to realize their pan-Turkic dream. Yeah. So the policy behind the Armenian genocide is the pan-Turkic union that they want to form. It's a sacred ambition of theirs, and I hate to say it, but it looks like they're finding the current situation of the imbalance of power as their most opportune moment to go for it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what is really frustrating is that even in media or Western media where they talk about it, and if you watch any news report, which half of them don't even know what they're talking about, it always starts, the Karabakh conflict started in 1988 and, the movement and this has been going on for over 100 years. This conflict has been happening. The Armenians have been being massacred. So when they say it started in 1988, no, it didn't. It started very, very long time ago.
Yeah, just having flare-ups throughout that time period. You're having peaks and valleys.
Well, you also had the occupation of the communists through Armenia and Azerbaijan. So that itself, both countries, if you think about it, were prisoners of Soviet Union, and they couldn't really do much about it.
Well, see, the thing is between the Russians and the Turks see themselves on the same level field, okay? Because they're both imperialistic.
Yeah.
For them, we're just like the subject people, okay? So during the fall of the Russian Empire, they came to an agreement. Atatürk, the Turkish side, pushed for the creation of a new Turkic country, Azerbaijan. Basically, it was created in 1918. Yeah. There is no other country of Azerbaijan.
Even the name itself was taken from
Yeah. So, but the agreement was that they will form a country out of that land, which comprised mostly of historic of lands that belong to historic the Armenian kingdom, and Shirvan, which was a Persian territory. So the deal was that Russia will let the Turks create a new country, but in return they will agree to make it part of the USSR. So that's how Azerbaijan basically became part of the So. But, of course, Atatürk went further and basically convinced Stalin and Lenin to give some more of the Armenian lands because their objective is again pan-Turkism. And that's the one thing with getting to know your enemies. You have to know the psyche, the character, the culture. They are very, very good, visionaries and planners.
Well, that's how you
and they'd
strike
stick-
deals like this.
So, Atatürk got more lands from the First Republic of Armenia, and then he made them give Nakhichevan and Artsakh to Azerbaijan.
Well, Kars as well. Don't forget Kars.
Yeah. So Gars was part of
Yeah.
Boyce.
I mean, but the thing is, you talk about their vision and what they were doing. Our leaders back then really, really messed up. I mean, a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of mistakes. I don't know if they were fooled or what type of position they were put in.
Well, at the same time, I don't think, based off of when you look at how the geopolitical situation was in that area back then, I don't think they really had that much pull. If you really think about it, I mean, imagine them sitting at a table. I can't imagine any Armenian representative having enough to say over the Bolsheviks and Ataturk and his people.
Well, I think because we're a small nation, our numbers are small. We had just endured a genocide. That's the other thing. We didn't just endure a genocide and cultural genocide where they demolished our monuments. We also endured ethnocide. And this we don't talk about as much as we should have. Because when the Bolsheviks went into Yerevan in 1920, they burned our books too.
Yeah.
So they burned our books. They wanted to Sovietize us. The Turks forbade, us to speak our language. They made us change our last names and so on. They wanted to Turkify us. So there was always re-engineering and getting away from the ethnicity. But this was all done by force. The way it continues. Unfortunately, as Armenians, I think we had a window of opportunity in 1991, 1994, and just like you said, looking back, it looks like we made major mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, not to get into the politics of it, and I mean, it goes so deep. But I from what I've read, a lot of mistakes were made. And you said, yeah, I understand the situation they were in, but we also had other powers who were backing us as well, and we didn't take the opportunity, just like we didn't take the opportunity today. Again, for some reason, Russia always got the better of us with their, I don't know what to call it, but for some reason they've always had this almost like
the gravity of that area.
We're always been under their spell for some reason.
Well, I think it's the relationship of a victim and an abuser. You know what I mean?
They abuse you and then they still love you, right?
Yeah. But they will keep you alive because you know that they like abusing and being in the picture.
Just by giving you
so you know that they'll do damage, but they'll keep you.
But they'll come and say, I'm sorry. Yeah, they'll come and say, I'm sorry. It's just abusive.
Versus Turkey that's going to completely massacre you. But they're not, neither one obviously is definitely. We have no friends. We have to understand.
We have no friends, but we also have to start being smarter and taking advantages of situations where it's going to benefit us. I mean, the entire political world or geopolitical world, it's all about give and take. And we have to be more selfish as a country, as a people, and use these opportunities to make sure that whatever deal we're making, we are benefiting a lot more. It is more beneficial for us than whoever we're making a deal with. Yeah, of course, that other country is going to benefit as well. But for some reason, everything you look at throughout history, we have given 80% and received 20%, which has been lies and backstabbing so much. And that is why we're in this condition.
Well, one thing I wanted to go into, as I was researching and all that, as I said, my scientific background, I guess, came into play. I wanted to understand why these types of crimes happen in general. I wanted to apply it to the entirety of humanity, because we are not the only people who got massacred for our lands. Yeah. Look around, it's still happening. Okay. So I wanted to find out why this happens. And after some thought, it was the answer was there. It was very, very basic. The main law that governs the world essentially is the law of the survival of the fittest. Everything else, like human rights, humanitarian laws and all that, are all created, mostly from the Western nations. They're all created to keep people under control, to give them a seeming normality or civility.
Yeah.
But when the going gets tough, when there's economic issues or there's world power struggle, that facade falls, and what you see is the law of the survival of the fittest. And it doesn't say the survival of the nicest. It says the survival of the fittest. And fit usually has to do with physical fitness, strength.
Yes.
So I was thinking about this, and I think it's basic, but you don't think about it, right? So what if you juxtapose that and apply that to nations? Okay, what makes a nation fit?
Military.
I think three things. One, knowledge of nationality,
Identity,
knowledge of national identity, knowledge of history. If you don't know your history, you cannot fight for your rights. You won't even know what the borders of your country is. So knowledge of history, which goes back to ethnocide again. Okay, if your enemies are attacking your knowledge of history, okay, they're doing it for a purpose, because that's one of the pillars of your fitness. If you don't know who you are, you can be fooled. They can do whatever. The second is economy. Economy has to do with basically survival, being able to sustain your population, being able to get into economic agreements and alliances, and being able to buy what? Weapons. So you have to have a solid economy. You have to know how to get into trade, diversify trade, and and of course the third being military power, which is very important. If your military might is not there, it's an invitation to come and attack you. So you have to have that balance. So these three are the pillars in my mind that define the fitness of a nation. So what have we done? If you look at Azerbaijan from the moment it was conceived 100 years ago, they have been working on these three. Very, very
creating fake history to believe in.
Okay, so let's start from the first pillar, right?
Yeah.
Identity, national identity. They're not indigenous to the area.
No.
So they created a story, a history to make them fit there. Even the choice of the name Azerbaijan, why did they choose it? To connect them to the
land.
The land.
Yeah.
Because they're not from there. From their, their ancestors are from Central Asia. So they came up with a history, fake history, borrowing the history of the cultures
who were there, yeah.
and they borrow Persian history. They make it theirs.
Yeah.
And
They've
then
called
they
Persian
decide.
Persian
Exactly.
historians.
Yes. So and then more recently, they spent so much money coming up with crazy conspiracy theories that they're descendants from Caucasian Albanians. Again, it's this identity concept. So they went even further with that, with their war of information, where they bought out journalists. Your name is, with their caviar diplomacy to push this around the world. And the next thing you know, the concept of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity was being pushed by the Western nations who know very well the history of that area. The second part, the economy, okay? They knew that it was James Carville's quote, it's the economy, stupid, okay? It's all about the economy, something that we as a nation don't understand, it seems. So they brought in the British. They brought in all sorts of people to invest in their land. Why? Because if you have investments there, then you will fight to protect your investments. All of a sudden you'll be, saying, yeah, Artsakh is Azerbaijan's land because because they're selling you the rights to the gold mining there. Well, why wouldn't you say that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the third being the military. I mean, they armed themselves to the teeth. So they worked on their fitness. And what did we do all these years? So our economy, I don't know. Let's start from national identity. Okay, we were very vulnerable to external and internal attacks to our national identity. You had all these people introducing this idea that no, we were weak. It was the Russians that made us win the war in 1994. Same thing they've done during the Soviet Union, where they shut down our churches and they made fun of our culture. So why? Because they were attacking that main pillar. So once we don't know who we are, once we don't value each other, once we are, divided, the one pillar is down already.
It's almost like a demoralization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as far as the economy is concerned, the Armenians had most of the oil refineries in Baku. Okay, Baku was built by Armenians. Imagine most of the oil refineries were in our hands. But I guess we didn't think about wheeling and dealing like they did. You know what I mean? Had we been the ones who said to the British, come over, we'll give you the oil, help us keep our lands. We don't think that way. Militarily, what a catastrophe. Putting all of your eggs in the basket of Russia with a traditional, whole history of betraying us. I mean, the minute we joined the CSTO, I think it was downhill from there. When you don't have checks and balances of who is providing you weapons or military alliances, it's like putting all of your money in one stock. Okay,
Yeah.
Major mistake. So we contributed to our downfall, and the major Achilles heel would be Armenia not knowing or not letting itself connect with the diaspora and Artsakh, not seeing us all as a cumulative. And in 1991, oh my God, mistakes galore, but we'll go there next.
When you say we, it was obviously it was the governing powers of that time who
Totally.
were, I believe that they were, under the influence of Russia. Even, there's stories about Vazgen, who was leaning towards the West, and that's one of the reasons why he was taken out. And Russia, did everything in their power to make sure that we stayed under their umbrella. And the people, I think, in 91, during the war and then after war, you had those difficult times in Armenia with no electricity, no water, really bad winters and everything. So people were exhausted. So nobody was really paying attention to what was happening. So like you said, they psychologically messed our culture up.
Yeah.
And we had just, we weren't even recovered from the Soviet Union. No. I mean, we just had freedom of being able to start looking into our identity.
As far as identity, when I talk about ethnocide, I'm mostly talking about the Armenians who were left behind in Turkey. A lot of them were forced to become Muslim.
Yes.
A lot of them are hidden Armenians and so on. Same ethnocide during the Stalin era, right? If you were nationalistic, you got sent to Siberia. Yeah. But that ethnocide did not apply to the diaspora. Okay, so in the diaspora, there was no force imposing you to change your identity. So I think the Armenian cause took, it was the diaspora that brought it back. Okay, it took us a while. The first 60 years, I think the diaspora was involved in recovery and survival, but slowly, with the work of individuals, again, such as Professor Richard Hovhannisyan, who put back our history together, I think the Armenian cause was revived in the diaspora.
Yeah.
because just like you said, Armenia stayed under the influence of Russia. But again, 1991. Why do we go back to that date? Because we had a small window of opportunity to reversal of this. So the only difference between the diaspora, the diaspora did not go through ethnocide, but the diaspora did not have a state that represented it. It did not have the platform of a state, so it could not take Turkey to the courts because it was not a state. So that's the difference. So here you have your knowledge of ethnicity, your knowledge of history, and you're reviving your cause, but you don't have a voice on the international level. Whereas the state of Armenia did, but you had powers oppressing that. But in 1991, after going through all that tragedy and trying to gain independence from USSR, why would you go back into a military alliance with the entity that you were trying to extricate yourself from? It just doesn't make sense. The other thing, in 1991, by the way, if you don't stand next to history and truth as a state, you lose the trust of your people,
Of course.
and you lose the respect of others. So in 1991, the entity that stood next to truth was Azerbaijan. Okay, in 1991, they denounced the Soviet years as occupation, which was phenomenal. I mean, that takes guts, right?
Yeah.
So, but the other thing they did, they announced themselves as the new independent Azerbaijan, as a successor of the 1918 Azerbaijan, which was like a gift given to us on a silver platter, because we should have jumped all over that to tell them, oh well, that's great, but the 1918 Azerbaijan did not contain Nakhchivan and Artsakh in it. Even that we didn't do. It was just incredible. What did when I say we, I'm talking about the state of Armenia.
Sure.
So what did the state of Armenia do? It announced itself as the third independent republic, successor of Soviet Armenia. Now, why would you do that? So automatically you're saying
You've already created your own boundaries.
saying Nakhichevan and Western Armenia are not mine, and but Artsakh is basically Azerbaijan's. And then when we won the war, we became de facto occupiers of our own land. So had we done the same thing that Azerbaijan had done, had we had the courage to denounce the Soviet era as occupation and announce that all the treaties signed by the Soviet Union was null and void. We're talking about the Gars Treaty, the Moscow Treaty, and all the treaties or the policies that moved Nakhichevan and Artsakh to Azerbaijan. And we had announced ourselves as the successor of the 1918 Armenia. We're talking about Wilsonian Armenia. So automatically, the message would have been Nakhichevan and Artsakh are occupied by Azerbaijan.
Yeah, you would have flipped the script on them.
Totally. Yeah. We made ourselves, with our own hands, the occupiers of our own land. Major mistake. But who drove us to do that? I think, again, we were under pressure not to do that. Besides the leaders that came onto the scene, like,
well, I mean, at that time it was Yeltsin who, Yeltsin brought Putin, and I don't know if Putin, being KGB, had some kind of a dirt on Yeltsin, but because Yeltsin himself was a very
he was a very sloppy individual.
He had done a lot of. I mean, there's stories about him being.
I don't know if that was by design or if that was just who he was. I've never personally looked that much into it, but I do know he was those were very sloppy years.
Yeah, and when he's the one who brought Putin, in and made him. First, he was some kind of a position, and then became the prime minister, and then later on president. But I think the deal was that, we're going to go through the whole now Russian Federation, but they still kept the same, Soviet mentality. And I mean, maybe the Soviet Union didn't exist, but it did. Because their influence was still in Armenia and other Soviet
And
countries
all the other republics
as well. And if you think about it, financially, you say as far as economy goes, right? What do? We gave everything to them, from our railroads to our, electrical, gas. I mean, whatever you can think of, we just handed it to them. And by the way, Russia. Well, let me rephrase that. Armenia is the only ex-Soviet country that is not, I don't want to say still, but ended up paying dues to Russia, and none of the other ex-Soviet countries did as well. They didn't. Armenia is the only one who paid dues to Russia.
Please protect us.
Yeah.
Basically, in other words.
It's unbelievable.
It's mind-boggling, but I come back to the idea of knowing who you are and standing up for yourself. And I think the only time we gained the world's respect, or they paused, was in 1994 when we won that first war. And even there, we made major mistakes, because if you're winning, you don't stop a war. Okay, so who stopped it? Russia again. Basically, it was like they stopped so that, in hindsight, it looks as if they gave Azerbaijan time to recover and come back. But if we were winning, victories should have consequences, right? So we should have continued the war since we were winning until we got Azerbaijan to sign a peace treaty that said
that
Artsakh belongs to you.
Yours, yeah.
By the way, Azerbaijan has done that already. In September 30th of 1920, there's a document signed by the Russians and the Azeris that says, we are no longer contesting any of your lands. Armenia, Nakhichevan, Zangezur, and Artsakh belong to you legally. This is done by Azerbaijan, and the document is available. I mean, it's such a tragic. By the way, when it comes to Artsakh, Artsakh was also recognized as part of Armenia by the League of Nations.
Okay? Yeah.
So we have all these things. The only thing that was left to do, according to the League of Nations back then, was to draw the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And they rejected Azerbaijan's membership application to the League of Nations. Why? Saying that you have never existed as a country before, so we don't know where your boundaries are, and you're contesting. This is all on paper. This all exists. So I guess my point is, when they spend an arm and a leg, they pay off the entire world to push all these falsehoods and fabrications. What do? We stayed quiet about the truth, the facts that we have, the so many maps dating all the way back to the 2nd century BC that show Artsakh was part of Armenia. It's really sad.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. In your book, you mentioned there's a lot of misperceptions and falsehoods and whatnot. I mean, I know you already started elaborating on it, but I mean, keep going. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
So basically, I don't know if you're familiar with the Paris Peace. Okay, so basically that was done right after World War I.
Yeah.
And Armenia was invited by the Allies so that they decide what the borders of Armenia would be. So what the Armenian delegation turned in, we have that map. It includes Nakhichevan. It includes Artsakh. The way the boundaries are drawn around Artsakh, they also include some of Utik. Okay, so you have Artsakh, which was the 12th province of the Kingdom of Armenia. You have, or was it the 10th? And then you have Utik next to it. And then you have Paitagaran, where Baku is. Paitagaran was the 15th province. So the delegation to the Paris Peace Conference, the way they drew the borders, they took some of Utik too. The main city in Utik being Ganzak, which is now known as Ganja.
Yeah.
That's an Armenian city too. So the way Artsakh has always been described, Artsakh, it's not just Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh is a Soviet territory. So Artsakh has all sorts of lowlands, okay? And when I talk about the lowlands, we're talking about the 7 regions that we supposedly occupied. Okay, that's part of Artsakh. They were part of Artsakh and Utik. So when in 1921, Stalin transferred Karabakh to Azerbaijan unilaterally, by the way. It was his own call. It's completely illegal.
Of course it was.
Against the will of the Armenians. Okay, if this was a disputed land, you don't just hand the land to one of the parties like that. There has to be some kind of mediator that decides upon history and demographics, some kind of. So he basically handed it to them. So when he first handed it to them, he handed the whole thing with the lowlands, with the Karvachar, Kashatar, Veranda, all of the surrounding lands. So what they did, they carved out all of those lands, the famous 7 regions that we supposedly occupied. They carved them out, okay, and they left the mountainous area, and they called it Nagorno, which is a Russian word, mountainous. They called it Nagorno-Karabakh, and they made it, what? An autonomous enclave, self-governed enclave. The name of the place was the Autonomous Enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh throughout the Soviet Union. So, and then the surrounding lands got absorbed into Azerbaijan. Why? Because they basically encapsulated Nagorno-Karabakh into Azerbaijan so that it has no way of reattaching itself to Armenia.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing that Aliyev is so allergic about, and he pays people to never use this terminology, is the fact that Nagorno-Karabakh was autonomous throughout the Soviet Union. So it was almost independent. But do you see that terminology being used anywhere? No one uses it. Why? Because they don't want to upset them. That's something that completely was shoved under the rug by the whole world, to be honest. So what did we do for 30 years?
It ties into what you're saying with economic power.
Totally.
100%.
Totally. They all pushed the Azeri narrative because...
Don't step on that toe.
Because they're gaining. They have, they're making... they're profiting from Artsakh. And that's why they were quiet for 10 months. You have, gold mines there being...
investors
foreign
investors.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when we won the war, it all went downhill from there because of external and internal, things. Strife. By the way, it's not just it's not just Artsakh that got blockaded. Armenia has been blockaded for 30 years.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
So you have, which is totally illegal. So bottom line, I think when you don't stand up for yourself, when you don't stand next to your, the right side of history, you don't know how to protect your rights. You don't know how to speak up for your rights or fight for your rights. No one respects you. One. Second, it's an open invitation to
be attacked. Yeah.
So that's what the current government, unfortunately, has done. And the previous ones, you almost wonder if they were puppets of the.
They were.
They were benefiting from being in power.
Yeah. What would have been a normal reaction when Armenia got independence? What's the first thing that crosses your mind? What's the normal thing that they should have done? Sue Turkey for the genocide. It's a no-brainer, right? You gained your independence. But that's not how they were programmed. They were programmed throughout the Soviet era to distrust each other.
It's funny you say that. I was just having this conversation outside before you arrived, and I don't know if Andy's watching, but we're talking about in 30 years when the Artsakh war happened, there was more Artsaksis in Artsakh than they were recently. I think the number was somewhere around 250,000 Artsaksis lived in Artsakh in 1991 when the war started. And then, we were talking about how the decline of population. Population is one of the most pivotal parts of a country. Yeah. And instead of, like you said, 30 years, instead of growing, Artsakh should have been 500,000 right now, and Armenia should have been
Yes,
6
but
million right now.
to that billionaire who married 700 couples in Artsakh and wanted to increase the population.
Count.
What happened to that billionaire?
He
Got sent to Russia and he died in the prison there.
yeah.
Putin asked for him to be handed over. So what's happening right now has been in the works for 30 years, basically.
Yeah.
This was going to happen. It was programmed to happen.
But what's frustrating is, are we as a people that blind, or is the government, as a diaspora, it's like being that brother that's watching something happen in your brother's or sister's house through the window, and you can't do anything
I'm
about
going
it.
to answer that question. We're short-term thinkers. These people, we've talked about this with other topics. These people, these sharks, okay, they think 15, 20, 30, 50 years ahead. They don't plan for what's going to happen this coming weekend. They think about 10, 15, 20 years from now. And this is how they demoralize you over time. You don't know what's coming because you're thinking about, how am I going to make my money in the next year? That's what these people that were in charge previous to this current administration were thinking, like, feed us, give us, let us get rich. What am I going to get right now? While enemies, let's call them that, were thinking about, okay, whatever, let them have their cake right now. 10, 15 years from now, we're going to do this, like you've been mentioning. This is the difference, man.
I mean, a nation that doesn't have vision, doesn't know what it wants to accomplish, ceases to be a nation. Yeah. And on top of it, we deferred our protection to the entity that has abused us. And what happened to the economy? And what happened to the billions? It went into the pockets of leaders.
Complacency, thinking that you're going to have protection by the same entity.
Yeah.
By the way, that second pillar, the economy that we mentioned. Okay, what happened to the economy during all these years? Well, what happened to it was that this external power encouraged corruption. Okay, so that's what did us.
Because that's how they recovered themselves.
Into corrupt pockets instead of, we had so much work to do from 1991. We had so much work to do, which Azerbaijan did, and we didn't. Even in the diaspora. But then I don't want to blame the diaspora because, as I said earlier, it doesn't have the platform of a state.
Yeah. I'm sorry, diaspora did a lot. Diaspora built roads, built schools. Diaspora became a bank account for them.
But they also got rich off the diaspora.
That's what I'm saying. They used us, I mean, come on, all the projects we did in Artsakh, in Armenia, this thing when they say, as a diasporan, you have no right to criticize Armenians in Armenia. You know what? Wait a minute. When you need help, you come to us. You're scrambling, help us. And then we do. And then when we have the right to give our opinion, I've had this conversation with friends as well. Oh, as a diasporan, you have no right because you don't live there. Unless you go live there, then you'll get to have the right to make decisions on what they decide to do, how they vote, and this and that. No, I'm sorry. I always say, if my brother in his house is having major issues and his family's about to collapse, I have the right to step in and help and give my opinion or try to do something. What are you going to just sit there and go, well, I don't live there, so I don't have the right to vote there, so I'm just going to let them fall apart. I'm sorry, that's a cop-out. That's a cop-out. You cannot think that way.
Well, it goes back to identity and, putting your collective resources together. You know what I mean? Putting yourself and your people first.
Yeah.
But throughout the Soviet era, when you had a system that encouraged Armenians to turn in each other, you know what I mean? They encouraged being non-nationalistic because whomever was nationalistic, God forbid, they got exiled and all that. So it goes back to ethnocide, right? They re-engineered the Armenian character, they did major harm. But it's sad because individually we have some major geniuses. I mean, we've invented so many things, but when it comes
who took the claim of those inventions? Soviet.
Yeah, of course.
Soviet Union,
but I mean,
right?
throughout the world.
Yeah.
But when it comes to creating a nation, I hate to say this, but we act like a tribe, like a backwards tribe. It's sad, but we could have done much more. It's very tragic.
That's one of the key words. Could have, and we didn't. But anybody who's joining us, we have Katya joining us. She's the author of Forbidden Homeland, Story of a Diaspora. And, everything we've talked about so far, you do cover it in the book, but you tell it from your story.
So, the rest of the title, Forbidden Homeland, Story of a Diasporan. The book is the story of my generation, okay, the generation whose grandparents were genocide survivors. And I think the generation that felt the passion for justice the most, because these were our grandparents. Unfortunately, that feeling, as you move further away from that generation, it's kind of
dwindling down.
It's kind of dwindling down. But I made the book my memoir on purpose because I wanted to write it in my voice intentionally to basically say that what's happening to the Armenian nation is an ongoing crime. I wanted to give it a current voice.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's therefore the book doesn't look to the past, because I don't want it to be about the past, because the crime is continuing now and we know what their final goal is. So that's why it's written in a very vivid, current voice on purpose, as I said. And it explains the Armenian genocide the way I think we should have explained it. Okay, I think we should have emphasized the pan-Turkic ambition behind it. The more we kept quiet about the truth, the more our explanations were so rudimentary and basic. We gave them the opportunity. We gave the other side the opportunity to weave their tales. For example, they said at one point there was a civil war during World War I. That's why we got killed. Or we were the fifth column.
That's the major lie.
We were the fifth column. We were coming after them. We were helping the Russians. But wait a minute, was there a war during the Hamidian massacres?
No.
You know what I mean? So we I don't know if it's going to help now, but regardless, things change. Leaderships come and go. You never know. The intent of the book is to educate us, to rebuild our ethnic identity, because we need to know the truth first to be able to fight for it. So that's what the book tries to do. It pushes back on all the fabrications coming from the other side. It exposes all the Western involvement that's covered up also, from the SERF Treaty, from President Woodrow Wilson's arbitral award. So that's the intent. The major goal of the book is education.
And you tell the story of the book that you have it written. It really starts from Lebanon and what you experienced, the war in Lebanon as a child, and I mean, I can't even imagine what you went through, get here, and then kind of discover this new identity, like you said, by chance of these two girls you met in college. I mean, it's a fascinating story.
It's almost like a great story of like a destiny point. Like you reached this moment that was just,
I'm telling you,
going to pick you up and take you off.
A superstitious person. The way things happen, it's as if the story came to me to be told.
Yeah.
By the way, the reason why I go into the Lebanese experience is because when I was researching about my grandparents' story, it took so much effort. And then I realized, wait a minute, how about the diasporan story? Why was I born in Lebanon? Because I was the grandchild of refugees. Okay, so then I wanted to explore the Lebanese side of the story, Lebanese Armenian side of the story, and I appreciated the importance of writing down my experiences and the Armenian Lebanese experience, so that my offspring, if they want to know about our experiences, would know what we have gone through. But the main point being the Lebanese-Armenian experience is just an extension of the genocide. Okay, there would have been no Lebanese-Armenian community if it weren't for the genocide. So you can't extricate one from the other,
No.
because my existence, your existence, our stories are in direct consequence to the genocide. So you can't separate the two.
Yeah. Again, thank you everybody who's joining us live on Facebook, YouTube, and X. Those of you who will be listening to us later on in the podcast, we'll have the link for the book in the body, so you guys can click on that and order. And those of you who are watching us right now, the QR code is on the screen. You can scan that and order her book. It's a fascinating story. You guys want to read this. And if
award-winning book.
Award-winning,
Yes,
that's right.
yes.
We forgot to mention that.
It won the Library Titan Gold Book Award and third place in the World Politics category in 2023 Spring Book Fest Awards.
Yeah.
Yes, and these are the only two contests that I entered the book in. And
So far.
Yeah.
And those of you who might have questions, please feel free in the chat to ask question, and we'll pass it on to Katya. And RP says hello.
Hi, RP.
She's here with us. So one of the questions is, so much, obviously you did so much research, and what would be some of the pivotal historical facts or narratives that you aim to cover in this book, The Forbidden Homeland? Can you shed some light on that?
I like to describe my book as an Armenian-American journey, because I found my relatives here in America. Besides that, since I'm an American, I would like the book. With the book, I want to raise awareness about American involvement in foreign policies and where our tax dollars are going. I can guarantee you the majority of the American people don't know where their monies are being spent and what policies we're pursuing are being pursued in their names. So I wanted to expose the fact that during World War I, the Armenian story was a household known story.
It was.
The Americans were very involved, from the missionaries,
Famous
with
actors.
the Near East Fund, which was the first,
They reached $50 million.
yeah, I mean, the Near East Fund basically saved the lives of 130,000 Armenian orphans, whose descendants we are practically.
Yeah.
So the one thing that, going back to your question, the one thing that I go over in the book, and it's something that we need to, put the spotlight on, is the June 1920 U.S. Senate vote over a mandate over Armenia. Okay, when I read about this, this was fascinating. If you guys recall the terms of the Sèvres Treaty, okay, so through the Sèvres Treaty, there were mandates put on Lebanon and Syria. French mandate was put on over Lebanon and Syria, and there was a British mandate that was put on Iraq and Palestine, I think, right? So the British suggested for the Americans to put an American mandate over Armenia, so that it helps the Armenians to stand on their feet and be able to govern themselves. Okay, so this vote took place on June 1st, I think, in 1920, in the U.S. Senate. It did not pass. It did not pass because Turkey and Russia by then became allies, because they didn't want any Americans coming into their region. They didn't want any Westerners coming to their region. Does this sound familiar? Okay, so they had amassed their armies in 1920, and in September of 1920, they both attacked Armenia and took it over. Okay, and divided their lands. 100 years later, on the anniversary of that invasion, in September of 2020, is when the invasion of Artsakh happened. Exactly 100 years after the 1920 September invasion of Turkey and Russia.
There's a lot of things.
So, yes. So all of this has been in the planning for years. Okay, so they have very.
I'm
They
sorry
play
to
with
cut
the
you
dates.
off. When you say planning for years, can you imagine? I mean, those people who were planning it in 1920 are not alive. So
Well, that tells you.
I mean, generationally,
Yes.
this is like programmed in. Okay, your father's did this. You're gonna have to follow through with this. Your I mean, it went on and on and on and on till today.
Yeah, but
I mean, look at how many generations have
But
gone.
the same exact thing is repeating is insane.
But that's what I'm saying, that it's
because that invasion, if you look it up in Wikipedia or in history books that are mentioning it, that invasion is described as the Turkish Armenian War. What are we talking about? It was an invasion. Just like the invasion of Artsakh of 2020 is being described as the second Karabakh War.
Yeah, that was
a genocidal invasion. We're talking about a coalition, 10 times larger than the 150,000 people who just wanted to live in freedom and democracy. And that's the ironic part, that the Western, so to speak, leaders in democracy and human rights ignored Artsakh's call for independence and self-determination, and they completely ignored it. And whose side are they on? So history is repeating.
100%.
Same players, just like Russia back then. Lenin gave all the gold and weapons to Turkey to lure it into its sphere. And where did Atatürk use those weapons and money to attack Armenia? Russia armed Azerbaijan to attack us, and this is our ally. I mean, we can't be this naive and stupid. The mistakes that have been made. It's just
apparently we are. Or
apparently
when we say we are, I'm talking about
the state.
the state of
Yeah.
Armenia.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's
I mean,
really
literally,
frustrating.
it seems like everything that happened post World War One, near the end of World War One, going into the mid-20s, feels as though if anyone knows any of the pillars of the history back then, everything seems to be cyclical on so many different facets.
Yeah, every so often, I guess, power shifts.
They're dressed a little bit differently.
I said facade of human rights falls off of the world's face.
Yeah.
Look what's happening in Israel. So, and we're all out. We're all about the law of the survival of the fittest. Fittest meaning it might. Yeah.
So you talked about the Armenian-American journey briefly. Can you go a little bit more into that? Because I know you mentioned in Vic's previous question. Elaborate on that a little bit more about your journey from here and what you discovered. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, but what other key things did you find that kind of kept driving you with this?
Well, the main key, I mean, the main things, the main thing being the war of information that was being led by Turkey and Azerbaijan. I think we didn't take that war seriously enough. We wanted to rely on our limited resources. You know how when you start a company, that company doesn't grow unless you bring professionals, right?
Of course.
So I don't think we should have risked just relying on our capabilities, and we should have hired PR companies and lobbyists just like they did to counter all that false information that literally changed the narrative. Because if you remember when the Soviet Union was collapsing and the Nagorno-Karabakh, I guess they wanted to become independent from the Soviet Union. By the way, Nagorno-Karabakh, the autonomous, followed the 1990 Russian law of secession. They seceded from the USSR legally. They followed it point by point, because Article 3 in that law says if you are in an enclave that was formed during the Soviet Union, you also have the right to decide on your status. So they did everything legally.
Yeah.
They were coming out of the Soviet Union that was collapsing, that had put this law in effect legally. So what was the response from Azerbaijan? They initiated the war. They attacked to keep a hold on and annex it once and for all. So what I'm trying to get at is I remember very well the Nagorno-Karabakh movement being covered on American news. Okay, they welcomed it as the start of a democratic movement in the USSR. Okay, and our story was being told correctly back then.
Such an interesting vantage point.
Yeah, it was complete. If you go back, it was being covered. It was being welcomed. And we almost felt very important that we started a democratic movement in the USSR. But what happened 30 years later? The whole story was turned upside down, and now we were being portrayed. When I say we, again, the state. They attacked. They started a war. We won the war, to their surprise. But 30 years later, everybody pushed this narrative that the Armenian side was the aggressors and they were occupying Azeri lands. So, I mean, it's just ironic the way things shift because of geopolitics. But so as I was discovering this, obviously I was getting angry and I was writing it down. So it's very gratifying when a non-Armenian reads my book. And I had a very good review a couple of days ago on Amazon. And it's exactly what I was trying to accomplish. It's very educational, and a lot of the terminologies and the locations and are American, so they can relate to it.
It's an American story.
I tell them, I say, basically, I talk about how we immigrated. We first lived in Van Nuys, and so they can relate to all this. So among all this information comes the information that there's a Section 907 of the Freedom Act that the presidents are waiving to arm a dictatorial genocidal regime, and it's their tax money. So it raises awareness on that level for the Americans, and so this person was very upset because they hear about all the beheadings. And all the war crimes that have been committed by Azerbaijan, and they get upset that their money is going towards that.
Yeah.
So that's the value of the book.
There's a saying, especially these days with everything going on, your tax dollars are funding wars abroad.
Yeah.
That's not a conspiracy theory, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that is fact.
Yep.
We're gonna get to question 7.
I think we covered most.
But I was gonna ask you, what all the research you were doing, and obviously putting your story. I can't even imagine while you're finding all these. I mean, you talk about a rabbit hole. It's not just one hole. It's holes. I mean, many.
Yeah.
What were some of the compelling stories that you discovered that were just is this one
Good
or
question.
two that stick out that you're just it just blew your mind, you just couldn't believe it, and you had to put
a wow moment.
Yeah.
Well, the wow moment was that Senate vote that I wasn't aware of.
Okay.
Can you imagine for a second if that had passed and America had put a mandate over Armenia? I mean, the whole
entire world would look different right now.
Completely different. I think I hit on most of them, but
from your personal story, from
my perspective, okay, the League of Nations was the predecessor of the United Nations. Okay, let's review what it's done. Okay, it has recognized Greater Armenia as a sovereign state. When I say Greater Armenia, I'm referring to Wilsonian Armenia.
Yeah.
And President Woodrow Wilson gave an arbitral award to us. Okay, he gave us, when I say again the state, so he gave us 3 of the Armenian vilayets out of the 6. He left out Cilicia, and he left out 3 of the vilayets, and he gave us Drabizon so that we have access to sea. And according to the definition of arbitral awards, they are not reversible once they're given. Okay, so by definition, those lands are occupied by Turkey by definition. So you have on paper the League of Nations having recognized Wilsonian Armenia, which included Nakhichevan. Okay, Nakhichevan, the word is Armenian, for God's sakes. So it's one of the oldest areas of Armenia. So Nakhichevan and Artsakh were recognized as part of the state of Armenia. And Article 92 of the Serf Treaty refers to Artsakh, basically. Article 92 of the Serf Treaty says the only thing left to do is to decide the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
Nowhere in these documents does it say we recognize Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan. Nowhere near that. There was no such conversation. So when we have all this document, the state of Armenia, why is it sitting on these documents? Why is it not exposing them? So something here is not normal, and I think you touched upon it. I don't think we ever gained independence. We were always consistently under the influence of Russia or the local powers.
I mean, I personally think the influence of Russia goes way before even in the 1800s. Yeah. We've always been, I think, from the last kingdom of Armenia, which ended in what year was it? 1600s?
It was in the 1500s.
1500s.
Ottoman rule.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Ottoman rule. 1500s. After that, we've been under Ottoman rule, and then
for 4 centuries.
Yeah, but I think Russia came in the picture in the 1800s, and for some reason you can't really blame the people at that time because they were like the saviors in a way. They looked at them like that, but like you said, it was
Christian.
They were also Christian, and they were the abusive father who beat them constantly, who beat them, and then went and caressed them and said, "I love you. I beat you because I love you." You know, it's that that's abusive. You know, yeah, it is. That's what an abusive person does, right? So
you listen to some of their like news conferences, and you're like, "What are they saying?" I mean, it almost sounds like the Godfather movie. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We told you to stay here. You insulted us by going here. It's just. So as a partner, I think, unlike like Western powers, okay, if you compare them, I think, as far as Russia is concerned, as an ally, what it does, it makes sure that you don't get any stronger. You know what I mean? Whereas Western powers have empowered those countries that came under their influence. I think you can say that. But as far as Artsakh is concerned, it was 96% populated by Armenians. Okay, when it was given as an enclave to Azerbaijan, Aliyev's father has been quoted saying in an interview that he did everything in his power to increase to settle Azeris in Nagorno-Karabakh. Mm-hmm. So even with his efforts, and throughout the Soviet era, by the way, for 70 years, the Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians were oppressed. Okay, you don't want to leave a place because they're treating you well. For 70 years, they were oppressed. So with all of his efforts of settling, before the first war of Karabakh, the Azeri population had gone up to 23%. Okay, so there were like 35,000, 40,000 Azeris in Nagorno-Karabakh. Yeah. This is in 1991. Yeah. And then, they talk about 1 million refugees. All of that are lies. They're inflated. Okay, because if you look at the demographics and you look at the census, there were about 167,000 Azeris in Armenia. 167,000. 35,000 in Nagorno-Karabakh. Okay. And in the surrounding 7 lands, the 7 territories that we occupied, there were 350,000, I believe. So if you add this up, it doesn't come nowhere near 1 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And by the way, the Azeris who left Armenia, they were compensated by the Armenian government for their if I'm not mistaken, for their
Wow.
properties. So
didn't even know
they
that.
didn't leave because
No,
because
yeah,
of,
that's true. They gave him
I had
money.
no
They
idea.
so
yeah,
yeah, they
they
gave him.
didn't leave because of pogroms.
They left because they
yeah,
first of all they wanted to leave.
they wanted to leave, and
Yeah.
then the 35,000 in Nagorno-Karabakh left because they blockaded it and they were bombing it daily, so they didn't want to be there. They left on their own accord. In the meantime, you had almost 500,000 Armenians in mainland Azerbaijan that got kicked out by violent pogroms.
Yeah.
They didn't get compensated for nothing. On the contrary,
paid
their
with their
properties,
lives.
their properties were confiscated. So if you add the 500,000 there, and you add, how about Nakhichevan? There were 50,000 Armenians in 1920 in Nakhichevan. How many Armenians are there now? Zero. So if you add that 50,000, the 500,000, the current 120,000. Oh, by the way, we forgot about all the Armenians who got ethnically cleansed in those 7 regions.
Yeah.
Don't forget those. When they took those, they kicked out the Armenians from there. And when I say those, I'm talking about Kashatar, Karabachar,
It's
Veranda.
massive displacement.
Okay, and for example, we have Dadivank in Karabachar. Okay, what does a monastery from the what is it 9th century doing there?
Yeah.
Because those were our lands too. Same thing with the Agdam region,
Yeah.
okay, where Dikranagerd is from the 2nd century BC. That falls in those lands that we supposedly have. So basically, Armenians were kicked out of those lands within those 70 years. There were 500,000 were kicked out from mainland Azerbaijan. Nakhichevan was completely. So what Azerbaijan does, and this is not particular to Azerbaijan. This is like a Turkic modus operandi.
Yeah.
They deploy specific techniques. One is gaslighting, which falls within the abusive relationship. You know, they make you think that you caused this to yourself. You rebelled. That's why we came and massacred you because you rebelled. You know, they don't say the story from the
blame
beginning.
game.
Blame game. The second is symmetrical propaganda. So whatever applies to you, they preemptively, before you apply it to yourself, they apply it onto themselves to blur
They're the victim.
lines. So if we talk about Greater Armenia, which is a historical fact, now they're talking about Greater Azerbaijan, which has never existed.
Never.
When we talk about Western Armenia, which is a historic place, they are now talking about Western Azerbaijan. They copy you so that they confuse the rest of the world. It's like
But when you say confuse the rest of the educated world, West, East, doesn't matter. They know that this is all BS. But what we're afraid of and what we should worry about is this TikTok, Instagram generation that's growing up that has a 30-second attention span that doesn't know anything about history. Our own kids in Armenia are so uneducated. They're so caught up with social media and whatever they're doing, their TikTok dances and this and festivals and so forth, that they themselves, they don't know their history. And like you said, if you don't know your history, you don't know your identity. And then the world. So that's what we're battling right now, is because, listen, you and I, whatever time we have left in our lives, our kids, their kids, that generation, and non-Armenians too, they don't know world history. They have no idea. They have no idea, even today with the conflict of, not to get into it, Israel and Palestine. People don't know the history.
No.
They just play the blame game. They don't
mimic-
even know the history of Palestine, how all this began, why was Israel created as a state, who gave those lands to Israel, and all this stuff.
They mimic
people
the first
don't
thing they hear.
know.
The first seed that's planted.
And
Unfortunately.
the smart states like Azerbaijan have taken advantage of this and they use it towards us.
They have learned from our mistakes, and that's the tragic part. When you're winning, you don't stop a war. That's what they're doing. For 30 years, they brainwashed their youth. Okay, they made us, they institutionalized hating Armenians, Armenophobia. For 30 years, they prepared the whole generation to go back to their lands. You know what I mean? And what have we done? Okay, this leadership when it
We
first
made
came,
fun of them. We made fun of them. We called
we are
them
not educating
ish, donkeys. You know, we made cartoons about them.
you have to know your enemy very,
Yeah.
very
Yeah,
well.
but they've been funding and helping fund or bribe the right people, the people in power throughout Europe and in the West
Yeah, because they know about
for
economy.
decades.
They know how it
Absolutely.
works, and
We
it
can
doesn't
sit there
seem
and
like
make
they
fun of them
do.
all they want, but they're going to keep funneling their money.
For example, when it comes to PR companies and
Uh-huh.
lobbyists,
Lobbying, yeah.
unless you don't invest in them, guess what? No one's gonna go and spread your facts. You know what I'm saying? You
This
have to be
is,
part of the system, unfortunately.
of course, and this is kind of, I mean, it would segue into my next question or comment would be your book discusses this, right? A
Yes,
part of this
all of
broader
it.
conversation in
It
terms of,
discusses all of it.
yeah, I mean, this gets into that broader conversation of economics, macroeconomics, lobbying power, what they did right in terms of trying to like I don't want to say buying these people.
Well, listen, we
because they did do this with their oil, with their natural gas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, we've talked about this before, and I always try not to criticize our people, the diaspora, especially the diaspora, is because, listen, we're all, you know, I get it. We did everything we can to keep our culture here. There's great organizations. And if you go back and you look at organizations like AGBU or you know, so many other ones that we can talk about, the school systems and this and that. Yeah, they did great work to preserve our culture, the diaspora here. But now they've become very powerful institutions, right? They have lots of money. Instead of spending that on the lobbying, like you said, and the PR and things like that, what are we doing? I mean, nothing against our faith, but we're building churches like there's no tomorrow, and the churches are empty. No one's going to church anymore. First of all, the church needs to figure out a way how to bring Armenians back to God, because people, I'm sorry, we as Armenians have been so distant from God, and we claim the first Armenian nation, a Christian nation, this and that, blah blah blah. But you go to church and it's empty most of the time. Sunday mass, no one's there. You know, maybe a few handful of people. But again, what are we gaining by what are in Glendale $12 million land they paid for to build another church? Imagine what that 12 million would have done for lobbying and PR. This is where we're. What is wrong with our leaders?
I
What
don't
is
know.
it like? Why are we so obsessed with materialistic
Yeah, that's-
showcasing? You know,
That's it right there. You can stop right there. You can stop
It's
right
pretty
there.
sad. We're thinking about which car to buy next. I don't know, and I keep on thinking
Even
we're
the-
smarter than this. You know, we're smarter than this. What's gone wrong with us?
We are,
And it
but
feels
it's-
like even the
we are, but
people-
it's again, it goes back to, in my opinion, and I'm very strong about this, is that short-term thinking.
Yeah.
They,
We
it's
are really
almost
good at that.
Oh my goodness, are we
Yeah.
ever?
Yeah.
Because they'll find a
think-
solution right away, but they're not thinking about 10 years from now. What are we going to do? They don't.
know, as far as the Armenian state goes, okay, first of all, you have to adapt to your environment a little. Okay, you are surrounded by autocratic, very aggressive
Sharks, wolves, whatever you want
nations
to call it.
with a historic ambition to annihilate you.
Yeah.
Okay, so for 30 years, we should have become like an Israel. We should have armed ourselves, become like a fortress. There was so much work to be done. Right after winning the war, we should have run to the international courts and the United Nations to prove that Artsakh was our land. And we should have denounced, we should have been courageous enough to denounce the
Soviets, yeah.
Occupation. And should have said that this was our land given to Azerbaijan illegally. By the way, it was still not autonomous. But so all this work that needed to be done was not done, and then oh my gosh, so we defer our protection to the entity that we were trying to get away from. I don't know. Maybe I'm not getting it. Yeah, it's truly tragic.
Going back to your experience writing the book, what were the biggest challenges? Obviously, having a professional life, being a mother, a wife, that crazy life we all have here, constantly on the go, and also doing research. Did you were you reaching out to people to get more information, or was it just books? Like, can you talk about those challenges you experienced? Because it took a long time for you to put this together.
Definitely, definitely. The only time I would reach out to people was to ask them, "Did you know about this? I just read this." They're like, "No, I didn't know." So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
Obviously, we had scholastic books. We had genocide scholars. Yes, but the common folk, the regular everyday Armenian like myself, was ignorant. So the challenge was to bring all this information in one place, connect all the dots, tell the story in its completion, but do it in a relatable, conversational way. So, and from reviews and feedback that I'm getting, that's what is being noticed about the book, that it's a conversation, but it weaves all of this information very seamlessly. And there's a few reviews in the beginning, right inside the cover of the book. That's what they say. So that was the challenge, to weave all this historical facts in a way where the reader doesn't feel that he's being lectured.
Yes.
It's still a conversation. It's in a conversational, relatable, written way. I think that was the challenge, and I was able, from the looks of it and from the awards, it looks like I've accomplished it. So my story was the living testimonial. That's why I wrote it in my personal voice, to basically bring the audience in the now, because this is a current story. Unlike some other classical genocide, it's not a genocide book. It's
a discovery book.
It's a self-discovery book, but it's also deep pan-Turkic ambition that we're living through. It's a very current, as I said, and it finishes. So ironically, I was almost done in 2019. I was done, and I was so worried about all the rhetoric that was coming out of Azerbaijan, and I kept on telling people, you know what, they're going to go for it. And I remember once at an Avarsartian Games, I told someone who's very involved in Armenia from the diaspora, he had invested so much. So I told him, you know what, I feel like they're going to attack from both sides. And what year was this? Maybe, I don't know, 2017. And he said, "What are you talking about? 30 years went by. That will never happen." None of us expected that they will continue the Armenian genocide.
Yeah.
Right? None of us, it didn't cross our minds that they would go for it, in this century, and the way they went for it, the way they disguised it, and now they're going, Aliyev is admitting out in the open that he attacked, and his dream was to do this. So for the genocide to continue in this day and age, and for the world to let it, I think that's where the trauma comes, because we're all like, it's quite shocking. Sometimes I tell my coworkers, I don't know how to tell them. What do I say? We lost some more of our country, and we're okay with it. It's just
exhausting.
It's a very
It's like you talk about the Artsakh war, and then you tell them what's happening, and they look at you like, okay, yeah, we get it. It's another war and this and that. But for them to really understand, I have to go back and tell them where it started.
Well,
I don't have the time to tell them where it started, but they don't have the attention span to sit there and listen to me. I have to go in detail and tell them, well, in 18, the Armenian massacre started this.
Very few people do.
So here's, I think, the best way. Now, you've written a great book. Everybody who's watching us, you guys see the QR code on the screen. If you don't have this book, you need to scan that and order it and get this book. first, you need to read it yourself because there is information that you may have not known about. None of us are perfect historical experts. Just because we do historical podcasts doesn't mean we know everything.
No.
We research, we try to learn. That's the point of this
We
podcast.
learn something
We
every
learn-
time we talk to somebody.
we learn, and we share it with you guys, and we learn together. That's the point. But then after you purchase this book right here, you guys need to pass it on to a non-Armenian. Have them read it. Just give it to them. Say, hey, read this book. I'll tell you one thing. Americans love reading books. And for some reason, they have time to read books.
Well, here's to your point, to piggyback what you just said. Right now, everything that's going on in the world, it's become like a tabletop conversation with everybody.
Yeah.
About everything. Not just specifically what's going on in the Middle East, but everything. Anything that comes up. Right now is a really good time.
Yeah.
You want to educate people or help each other get educated?
Yeah.
With history, with knowledge, this is the time.
Yeah.
It really is, as weird as it sounds. It's true.
Well, just like for 30 years, Azerbaijan prepared for this moment, we have to quit being lazy.
Of course.
And start educating. Just like you said, it starts from our youth. They have to know. It almost wants me to say that, heritage is not just cuisine and songs and genats. It's not just that. It comes with the responsibility of protecting it and also passing it on. So we have to now tell our story the way it should have been told to the world. There's a lot of work to be done there. My book is not the only one that's attempting to do this. There's a lot of documentaries coming out, a lot of books. So we have to push back and tell our story because we don't know where we're going. The world, things change. It's always dynamic. So we don't know how things might change. We don't know what Armenia is doing, but things, again, can change. But we also have to hire professionals. We criticize. I don't want to say we criticize. We don't appreciate what kind of value one tweet from a Kim Kardashian does. Okay, that's the equivalent of maybe several PR companies combined because she has how many followers? So basically, we have to take our story to the mainstream, to the level where Azerbaijan has taken its lies and fabrications. We can't. Keeping a nation is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of vision and work that go. It's not for the lazy. If you're lazy, then give the whole thing away and let's be done with it. So that work should start. It should have started yesterday, but it should start from our schools. And we are not teaching,
First of all,
we're teaching our facts.
If I can add something there, yes, it needs to start from the schools, but there's a few problems in the schools. Number one, I don't think we have the right historical books in the schools to teach the right history, because from what I see,
I could attest to that.
It's the bullet points of the stories of Kajvartan and so forth, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is there's a division within Armenian school of Western, Eastern. This has got even the kids. I mean, I understand there's but the fact they say, I don't understand Western Armenian. What is it that you don't understand? It's the same words. The dialect is a little bit different. And they do that on purpose. And then the kids, guess what? They're great friends. They're best friends. One's Eastern, one's Western. But they won't speak Armenian to one another. Or Parskahai. They won't speak Armenian because they already been kind of shamed with that division of I might say that word differently, or I didn't understand that word because it's a little bit more Arabic, or mine's a little bit too Russian, or this and that, whatever. Instead of saying, hey, you know what? And I told this to my daughter. She has really close friends who are Western, Parskahai, and I said, listen, talk to each other in Armenian. If they say a word you don't understand, or you say a word, say, hey, what does that mean? They'll explain it to you. Now you know. And you know what? You never know. You might start using that word, or they might start using. But you need to communicate in Armenian. because of that, they're all speaking English to one another.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is fighting at home with the kids, speak Armenian, speak Armenian, speak Armenian. I mean, me and my wife go at it all the time about this. I'm like, I've had enough. I can't do this. Every second word is speak Armenian, speak Armenian, speak Armenian. But you can't blame the kids because even in Armenian school, they're speaking English because there is that division.
Well, that's why R.P. Kerkorian is going to be publishing books for the kids, fiction books, but in Armenian. So listen, it takes a few people to get something rolling, and we have to do something. As you know, the Western Armenian dialect is UNESCO on the UNESCO endangered list. It starts from someplace. One thing about us, there must be a reason why we've been around for 7,000 years. There is resilience in us, and I believe in that. Unfortunately, we are peace-loving people. We are creators of beauty. We build beautiful things, but we have to learn how to have a vision for ourselves, and that comes from maybe a collective constitution that includes all of the Armenians, and something as simple as giving citizenship, Armenian citizenship, to all the Armenians.
Just like
I don't know.
Didn't Israel do that in Turkey too?
Yeah. So it again comes. Unfortunately, the diaspora does not have the platform or the power of the state of Armenia. So maybe, hopefully, we will have visionary leadership.
I mean, you talked about the citizenship. We put restrictions on our own people. Like you said, every Armenian should automatically, if you're born Armenian, should automatically get an Armenian citizenship.
I've talked about this in the past. I got an Armenian citizenship through sports, but I wasn't allowed to vote in Armenia. That was the one thing I didn't.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Yeah. There's nuances, but there's a way to connect everybody.
Sure.
Maybe our taxes might be minimal based, compared to, let's say, a citizen of Armenia who's living there, right? So there's ways of doing it. We have to do it for our survival, because the Armenian majority, it's not so silent, but it's silent on international platforms, is the diaspora. It is the Armenian majority.
Yeah, but then you have to Armenia. What is that government doing? Taking money and using it for their lavish lifestyles, this and that. I mean, that's the thing. All we do is attack one another.
It's a good point. If we're going to have citizenship, we have to have some say on some level.
That's what I'm saying. You cannot not have say and take taxes from me.
Ask for any accountability.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Look what happened. We should have. It's like a parent who just keeps on gifting lavish gifts upon his children and doesn't ask for any responsibility in return. You destroy that person, right? So that's basically on a national level.
Again, everyone who is watching and will be listening later on our podcast, please go ahead and purchase the book. Order it through Amazon. It's also available on Barnes & Noble, right?
Yes, it's available on Barnes & Noble's, barnesandnoble.com, Ingram Spark, also Abril Bookstore and Sardarabad bookstores.
Yeah. But like I said, the key is not just for you to get this book and read it for yourself. We want you to give it to a non-Armenian and have them read it. Just hand it to them. Say, hey, read this book. It's really exciting. It's a great story, and don't give too much about it. Don't mention what it is. Let them read it. Let them read it and discover the story of Armenia and its past and everything that you experienced through your eyes. And we talk about storytelling. Like I said, the reason why it resonates with other cultures who read the book is because of the fact that it's told from an Armenian-American side. Like you said, the local cities mentioned, the things you've experienced. Because at the end of the day, we are Americans. We live here. And we need to tell our stories, the diaspora stories, through in a way that the other cultures can relate. Like, hey, he's from Van Nuys or he's from Hollywood. Oh, wait, this happened.
With exactly what she said she's doing, with tying in actual historical facts, which people are always interested in.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
People love
By
history.
the way,
Yeah,
the
they
editor
do.
of my book is Mexican. She has a PhD in education, and she said she totally related to it because it goes back to the law of the survival of
Survival
the
of the
fittest,
fittest, yeah.
which applies to all of us. Okay, she related to the immigration side of the story, persecution.
That's a heck
She's
of a
like this.
yeah.
This is so very very relatable. Unfortunately, our numbers are also shrinking now from the Middle Eastern countries that had let us in. So our stories there are also,
Diminishing. Yeah.
retaining that memory is also
Yeah.
important. By the way, the most popular chapter is on Burj Hamid. That's the chapter that Armenian Lebanese Armenians are loving. Although I discuss the whole nation, no,
Okay.
all the different communities.
Yeah.
All right. So, do we get to the time machine question?
No, I don't think you.
No. I mean, we've been talking about the impacts the book would have.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
that's true.
for the last
Well, I mean,
7-8 minutes.
I mean, what do you want people to take from this
take
book?
away from the
take away
book.
from the book. Like, what would be
To cap it.
from both the Armenian side and non-Armenian side, if you can kind of.
From the Armenian side, it's like letting go of your child. We have a responsibility to retain and know who we are, and that's not a joke. We have to do it now because it's come down to our survival. As far as non-Armenians, this story is part of the humanities story. The cumulative humanities story, and. They have to know about it too. And the sad part is, you mentioned us being the first Christian nation. Artsakh has one of the oldest Christian Armenian monuments. I mean, very, very old.
Oh, yeah.
And those belong to humanity. I would have left for my American friends to have gone and seen those. They're just mind-boggling. So for a nation to destroy that, so that they destroy every last trace of us from there, and they're doing it fast, just like they did in Nakhichevan, so that we have nothing to go back to. By the way, Artsakh, if we don't fight for it now, it's going to become like a garrison, Erzurum, and
Well, we've had people there living there generation upon generation for 2,500 plus years, 3,000 years. We've talked about this in earlier episodes. It might be the one region, if you were kind of to map this somehow, where we've constantly occupied.
Totally. Yeah, it's the one area of Armenia that has been continuously inhabited, and even throughout Persian rule or Arab rule, we've had independence.
And we've had our indigenous people there for millennia.
And Azeri history, I mean, all they have going is that in 1743, Tatar Turk, took advantage of disputes between the Meliks of Artsakh, and convinced one of them to turn the place into the Karabakh Khanate. Okay, this is happening in 1742. That's the closest they can come. By the way, what's Khanate? That's what Persian territories were called. So this is their history there. Again, it was mostly populated by
Katya, here's the problem. They're winning.
That's it. That's the
They're
bottom
winning.
line.
They're fabricating these stories, and they're winning. People are starting to believe this stuff because, and the frustrating part is, as an Armenian, you're like, they're lying. They know that they're lying, and it's like this, and you can't really do anything about it because there's so much misinformation, especially on Twitter, and the fabrication of these stories, and apparently we massacred 1 million of them, and all. It's like they flipped the script on us, and we're not doing anything about it. We're sitting there, kind of like, no one's gonna buy this crap, but. No, they are.
Well, I mean,
people are gonna.
I think we have a tendency to be to judge others based on our values, sort of thing. No, they're nice. Eventually, they'll come around.
Yeah.
Very, very nonchalant and very mellow, but you're surrounded with wolves, literally.
Of course.
And I don't know. It's very irresponsible to. I don't know.
Well, I mean, just to get on the little funny side, I know you and I were having a good laugh at this with a few of our friends. Age of Empires seems to have.
Yeah, those of you who haven't seen, there's a popular game, Age of Empires. It's a video game.
It's like an online strategy game that's really blown up over the years.
And they just released a updated download where it's about the Armenian kingdoms,
ancient Armenian kingdoms and ancient Georgian kingdoms.
The Azerbaijanis have lost their minds. You should see the comments.
And it's a game.
Yeah,
it's so you can download it. I don't know what video game studio. It's a mobile gaming company. They've had this out for a while. They've advertised really big, and it's a very big following. It's an online strategy game for mobile devices mainly. It's not like on Xbox or any of that kind of stuff. And just last week, they announced that they're having this new extension to the game or to the series or whatever.
Wow.
I've never played it. I don't know what the format's like, explore ancient Armenian civilizations.
You can play as Armenian
Georgian civilizations.
Yeah, so you can play as Armenian kingdoms.
And the first comments under the official tweet release was Azerbaijanis absolutely losing their minds.
Yeah. What about we've been around there for thousands of years.
That would be fantastic.
We definitely, it's something we need to look into. But but then that shows that even, non-Armenians were on there saying, what? Azerbaijani kingdoms? What are you talking about?
You have ethical, professionals who come out and say it.
But that's not enough.
Geoffrey Robertson, the international human rights lawyer, who wrote an op-ed saying this place, Artsakh, is Armenian. You know what I mean? Yeah. So they know, but it goes back to those three pillars that we talked about. They have made deals to let Azerbaijan.
Not just the deals, the information, the falsified stories. So the truth is in the middle, but it is surrounded with so much falsification that nobody can see the truth. And you have to go through this clutter to get to their actual story, but you can't even get there.
Well, that's the thing, is that the money can manipulate. There's a lot of, I hate to say this, but you know how I feel about these things. Certain amounts of money can manipulate a lot of professions and a lot of things. Yeah. Like, I won't get into the examples, but you know where I'm going with this. Yeah. It's easy for them to buy people out, and they know who they're buying out. They're not just throwing mud at the wall and hoping one of them sticks. They know who they're going after.
Yeah.
By the way, if there was any time where we could have fought for Artsakh's independence, it is now. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
Again, our cause is being handed to us on a silver platter.
Oh, yeah.
We have to prove that this country has a genocidal intention against this enclave, and this enclave cannot survive with, just like...
I have a feeling that's what we're going. I think that's
they better...
Again, I'm hopeful that's what they're. Yeah. But I'm not gonna get into that.
You can always take advantage, and I'm a firm believer in this. I might be a little too much of an optimist, but you can always take advantage of enemy destroying itself. Power hungry. He's power hungry.
They
are power
and
hungry.
He's also paranoid. I mean, the fact that he has to walk on the flag of Artsakh as he went into Stepanakert, that shows you how insecure he is. Because
didn't he arrest those three kids because he had seen a footage of them walking over Azeri flag? And then he does the same thing. And 100 years later, it's the same strategies. Our leaders have been arrested.
Well, this was a great conversation, but we have one more question for you. We asked this to all our guests, and do you want to ask her?
Okay, fine.
All right, go ahead.
Time machine question, as we call it. If you could go back any time in Armenian history, when would it be and why?
Oh boy.
It's not a trick question.
I'm tempted to say I wish we could go back to 1994, 1991, and undid our errors.
That's history. I mean, so when we say history, we're not talking about ancient
it's
history.
Tragic. All we had to do was reinstate ourselves as the entity that the League of Nations had recognized, and automatically made Nakhichevan and Artsakh occupied by Azerbaijan, and look what that would have done to the Artsakh conflict.
Yeah.
But to make it fun, I wish I wish I could go back to during the Dikran mids. It's one. Yeah, and I wish I could have walked in Dikran that is now occupied by Azerbaijan, which is outrageous. We have Dikran, the whole city that he has built. By the way, he has built 4 of them with his name. In Askeran, Artsakh, that they're claiming to be their lands. Where were they during that era? But I wonder.
There were 7 of them actually.
Oh, really?
The original Dikranagert is by Diyarbakir.
Yeah.
So that would have been a fun.
I always say that was when this question came up from one of our listeners.
No, one of our listeners
came up with this question. So we're gonna and my thing was again same. I wanted to go back during the Tigan era and just walk the streets and the sounds, the smells, the fruits, the food, everything. Just experience that ancient Armenia, the kingdom.
That era, first century BC, moving into the first century AD. That era was phenomenal.
Another book would be written about how did we get here from that greatness.
Well, a great author like yourself
could serve as motivation.
Yeah. So next book.
We can inspire someone in the audience.
I mean, there's a lot of people who I've come across who have great ideas and things they want to do.
Storytelling, very educated listeners and followers. We really do.
Like, I mean, we're listened to, and we mention this all the time.
They're teaching us things half the time.
We're like in 73 countries. Yeah, we love all of our listeners and people who watch us on YouTube. 73 different countries we're listened to, and we get so many emails and love from Armenians and non-Armenians. We just want to tell our story the right way and keep it going, do our part. Like I said, this is a way of fighting that falsified information that is being put out there.
Absolutely.
But Katya, I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you for the information. Thank you for what you have done. Thank you for writing this book. I
did the hard work, so
start carrying the torch,
and hopefully an audio version. We got to look into that. Like I said, a lot of people, they drive nowadays. They don't have time to read, but the audio version I think would be a great option.
Get off your computers and read a book.
Yeah, but it's not that people don't have time. I'm
an advocate for that.
I understand.
And I hated reading books when I was a kid.
Feel of a book too.
No, I know, but
I hated reading books when I was a kid.
Finding the time to read is very difficult.
It's been
So, but again, everyone, the QR code is on the screen. Go ahead and scan it, or it's actually, we have the link in the body of YouTube. So if you're watching it, it's there. You can click on it and order the book.
The most gratifying part of this is hearing back from readers.
Yeah.
The most common one being, you wrote about my story. This is my story, especially Lebanese Armenians. But
the people who can relate to this.
The feedback is a lot of fun. Yeah,
of course it is.
Very gratifying.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for joining us tonight, everyone. Make sure you are following us on Instagram, where we announce our episodes and everything that we're doing. Mike is almost finished with the Hike for Our Heroes sculpture. We'll announce that as soon as it's ready.
Should have something to show next week, maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. Next weekend.
It's hike.
It's hike, like Nahabet, but little twist too.
It's up to you guys. This is just phenomenal. This platform that you've put together.
Thank you.
And the amount of money that you're raising with Hike for Heroes is very commendable. I encourage everyone to contribute.
What we're doing is just a small part. Like I said, Tavit is an amazing human being, and their organization, Hike for Our Heroes, all we're doing is just getting the word out there for people to help and donate. We donated from our part as much as we can, but they're doing great work. So it's all about coming together. That's what it is.
Put aside the egos.
Yeah. Another thing I want to mention, guys, support us on Patreon. You see that QR code on the top of the screen or in the body of our podcast. Support us. It's $5 a month. It helps us to continue this journey. There are a lot of expenses involved in producing a podcast, and plus all the other projects we have going on. So go to patreon.com/Mer Herosner and support us. And what else? Am I missing anything? No, right?
No.
So you think we'll announce we'll have something?
I'll have something next week.
Yeah, next episode we'll be back.
I'm being shady about it, as you can tell.
We'll be back with our regular. We're back with our third episode with Katya, and next week we'll continue our storytelling with
somewhere in the 11th century.
11th century.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll be back
continue.
with that. And
the 10th and 11th centuries had a lot of branches to it.
Yeah. It's a crazy time.
Of course,
it's a crazy
was.
time.
A lot of information during that time.
We have another probably 2-3 more episodes to do, and we'll be done with that era, and then we'll move on. But again, I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight. And as we always say at the end of every episode, respect one another.
Love one another.
Until the next episode, take care of yourselves.